So let me go and introduce you to Erica. The book just came out. It was the 11th, 2 days ago. 2 days ago, the book just came out. And that's what I love about the next big thing. It's like you're getting to see Erica with this brand new information and a brand new book. She is, I mean, look, it's, again, you have these incredible people, the Amy Cuddy presence, top TED Talk speakers. Erica is absolutely one of them, will be like the most sought after guru. I know you already are Erica. She's a world-renowned expert and keynote speaker, helping organizations and leaders innovate faster and further. She's spoken to worldwide organizations and enterprises that range from the World Economic Forum to the US Global Fortune 500 companies. She's named as one of the top management professionals around the world by global gurus. And she is the founder and CEO of Cotential, a company that helps leaders and teams leverage 21st century collaboration skills globally. Her writing has appeared in dozens of publications, including Fast Company, Harvard Business Review. She's an MPA from Harvard Kennedy School, MBA from MIT Sloan, and BS from the Wharton School. So, boy, and I was so excited to, when I first saw this book, saying what is a more appropriate topic right now that we're all struggling with. I mean, there isn't a day goes by that I feel like I needed some kind of a code or something that would help me to communicate with employees, staff, in every way. And so when I saw this, I was like, I had to have Erica come immediately. Erica, I know you started to write this book before the pandemic, well before the pandemic. So tell everybody about your work and what led you to writing this book?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Karen. It's great to be here with all of you today. So let me back up a little. As Karen said, I started writing digital body language in 2016, 5 years ago. But really, the journey of researching digital body language and writing this book has been a lifelong journey. I grew up as a shy and introverted girl in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My parents were Indian immigrants. And when I got to Pittsburgh, that meant my parents spoke Hindi at home. And so when I got to school, I had accented English. And I often got teased. I was very shy at school, but I would study other colleagues, other students to figure out the norms of American culture. I would watch the popular girls with their heads high, their shoulders back, the cool kids slouching during school assemblies. And so much of what I learned was by deciphering other people's body language. I was able to understand that it's not just what we say, it's about how we say it. And even as the Indian kid, I didn't know Hindi very well, but I would watch Indian Bollywood movies. And I didn't know exactly what the actors or actresses were saying in their language, but I could study their body language and know the entire plot of the story. Fast forward 30 years, I became a body language communications and collaborations consultant. No wonder it became my superpower. But about 5-6 years ago, I started hearing the same questions and challenges from my clients. Questions like, why is there so much misunderstanding at work? How do we better connect with different ages and working styles? And what I saw was that there was no rule book for the body of our language in a digital world. And what I realized as we fast forwarded, as we lead globally dispersed organizations, as we were on emails and conference calls and even emailing and conference calling with teammates in the same office well before the pandemic, we need to understand that today body language hasn't disappeared, it has transformed. And digital body language are really the new cues and signals. So, just like I was an immigrant to traditional body language as a kid, I realized today we're all immigrants to digital body language. And that's what set me on the journey to write this book.
So what has the loss of nonverbal body cues meant to today's workplace culture? We do a lot with workplace culture. So that was an important one I felt that people would be interested in knowing about.
We all know the power of nonverbal body language, the direct eye contact to showcase we're listening, the head bobbing and nodding, the lean in a sales conversation, the firm handshake where we know, okay, we're on the same page. Now, even on a video screen with screen freezes and echo delays, and the fact that it's not natural to see our own video while we're looking at others, most of those body cues are now pretty much gone. And again, as I'm trying to look into the camera to connect with all of you, I can't see any of you as I'm speaking. So also the back and forth of how we mirror, how we react to others. If someone's smiling right now, I may not know exactly who is smiling. This has caused a lot of misunderstanding at work, a lot of anxiety, a lot of paranoia. In fact, I recently ran a study with over 2,000 office workers, and it found that the average employee is wasting 4 hours per week on poor, unclear, or confusing digital communication. One of my clients told me a story. He sent a message to his boss that said, "Do you want to speak Wednesday or Thursday?" And his boss responds, "Yes." And I like to share that story because so many of the ways that we communicate digitally lose that body of our language. And my answer is, it is harder, but my hope with this book and with the content around digital body language is we can bring back emotional nuance and a sense of tone, but we have to understand that what was implicit in traditional body language, in the head nod, in the smile, has to be explicit in digital body language.
So, you know what I miss so much is the conversations. What type of conversations do we hope this book inspires around the virtual water cooler?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that has been most difficult. How do we reinvent the drive-by coffee chats, the water cooler, the happy hour experience where we can build bonds? And what I've actually discovered is that obviously, nothing replaces the magic in a room.
Yeah.
We know that. But there are things about a virtual water cooler experience that can be actually better, more inclusive, and more powerful than it ever was when we were in an office together. Let me give you a few examples. The first is, if you think about the way that we had the water cooler in the office, we were biased to who was on our floor, who was in our office, who was lucky to be at that happy hour. We often excluded other people in different locations, different parts of the world. And if we think about how to reinvent the virtual water cooler, whether it's a virtual office hours, every Friday, you all as a team get together and co-work for an hour, ask questions, discuss things while on a Zoom call, or these mini moments of water cooler effect within meetings. I have a client who has the first 5 minutes of the weekly team meeting. They rotate, and each person rotated runs a little icebreaker. Someone can read a poem and everyone can discuss it. Someone will share something from their kids. Someone will, have everyone watch a TED Talk before and then talk about it. And it does actually create more inclusivity in this nature of the water cooler effect. The third one that I think is really powerful is breakout rooms in Zoom or other video call formats. In traditional body language, we tend to be very biased in a happy hour or in a casual conversation. We tend to, because of our visual nature and unconscious bias, we walk to people that look like us. We sit next to people we know in that coffee chat. We don't engage and oftentimes break silos or build different connections. And actually the randomized breakout rooms are even more productive. We're meeting people, we're strengthening relationships and building diverse ties instead of just strengthening existing strong ties. And we've all seen this. People at the cafeteria sit with people they know. People at the party sit, chat with the people they know. And so this is an opportunity to actually be more intentional about geographical inclusivity, about visual inclusivity, and actually perhaps break silos and drive collaboration even better than it was in the office.
Has this increased or our workplace anxiety and misunderstanding? I mean, this year increased it a lot. I mean, I just feel there's been so much more anxiety because I've worked so much in the same room with people, and I love that. I'm a people person, and that's really caused so much more anxiety for me. And so I feel that way, and I assume a lot of other people are feeling that way.
Absolutely. In the study I just ran, we found that, up to 70% of employees cited that they had experienced some type of poor digital communication anxiety weekly. In my book, in chapter 2, I actually have a chapter called "Why Are You So Stressed? Navigating Digital Anxiety," because this is higher with, think about it, 60 to 80% of face-to-face communication was nonverbal body cues. And, really most of that has been removed now. So a couple of things I want to share here about anxiety. There are 4 types of digital anxiety that I have discovered are most common in the workplace. And in my book, I talk about norms that you can set to help reduce them in your workplace cultures. The first one is brevity. Brevity, especially in emails, texts, IMs, can create a lot of confusion. The pressure to communicate quickly can oftentimes create confusion on your team. I'll never forget a chief marketing officer who was giving feedback to her team around a deck they were working on. She sent an email saying, let's add a bit more research on this topic. She thought she said, let's add 2 more bullet points. Her team took it seriously. They created 10 new slides. They spent 40 hours on it. She was looking for 2 bullet points. It could have been done in 10 minutes. Think about how demotivated they felt because all of those slides were removed. And she chose brevity instead of clarity. The second type of digital anxiety is passive aggressiveness. Now, because we are behind a screen, we can't read if someone's smiling or on the verge of tears when they're messaging us. And so sometimes we read into passive aggressiveness in a different way. We think someone is, even though they're not, or we ruminate about someone's message. And here I talk a lot about not getting emotionally hijacked and knowing when to respond and when to just pick up the phone. I say picking up the phone is worth 1,000 emails. The third one is slow or no responses. And we don't hear back, even on a video call. Maybe Karen, if you hear that awkward silence, we all get alarmed. Is someone on mute? Is there a tech issue? When maybe someone's thinking. In a face-to-face meeting, if someone's stroking their chin, we don't interrupt them. We give them a moment. If they're furrowing their brows, we give them a moment because they're about to say something really thoughtful. But now we just rush them. So take the time, give some space for individuals to think and reflect, even simple things. I have a client who has her team answer questions in the chat first, and then she calls on people with different ideas. This allows introverts to exchange as much as extroverts, but extroverts need time. So give them airtime, but maybe use breakout rooms so that everyone has a space to share. So those are some examples of top sources of digital anxiety and how to resolve them.
So there was, I never had heard this before, but what is formality confusion and how do we get past it?
Yeah, so
before.
Yeah, another example of something that is anxiety producing is when we, have a certain norm around how formal or informal we should be in collaboration channels, and then somebody changes that. And it can make us concerned. So for example, if you and me, Karen, always emailed each other with, hey, Karen, and hi, Erica, with one-liners, with emojis and exclamations, and then all of a sudden you started emailing me with, dear Erica, and ended with, sincerely, Karen, I would start to think, where's this change in formality coming from? Or someone who you've worked with, you text all the time, and then they start saying, work with my assistant to get on my calendar. You would start to wonder, what's happening here? And formality confusion is actually something we have to understand in digital body language, and that there are norms of formality in different channels. Text is much more informal than emails. Video calls are more formal than emails. And understanding how to switch the formality is important. And again, for workplace leaders, understanding how to set these norms in their cultures is important, especially with Gen Z and millennials who may have different perspectives. In fact, I'll never forget a millennial employee at a company, often joined the company. She joined like in the last 5 years. And because she grew up using IM and chat tools, she thinks email is very formal. So she was asked to email the CEO of this organization. It's about a 500 person organization to get something. And she wrote, dear Mr. Etling, instead of, hey, Mike, hi, Mike. And everyone calls him Mike in the company. And the CHRO, her boss, had to tell her, this shouldn't be so formal. You should call Mike, Mike. It actually undermines you if you're too formal. So I think it's on both ends of the spectrum. It's not just young or old. It's that we're all learning these norms together.
And emojis? How do you feel about emojis?
I have so much in the book about emojis, caps, periods, exclamation points. Don't worry, I've got you here. But let me give you the breakdown of emojis. Yes. Think of emojis as the range of facial expressions. Happy, sad, grateful. There are thousands of emojis now, actually, whether you know it or not. I'm a big fan of thinking before you emoji, similar to word phrases like awesome or super. Those were not workplace terms 10 years ago, but like 5 years ago, people started using them in the workplace. It's kind of like that. Now, emojis are more normal in the workplace. Obviously not with someone you're selling to for the first time, or in, maybe an investment banking culture where it's very formal all the time. But it has cascaded corporate America, whether you like it or not, whether you're an emoji user or not. Women tend to use them more than men. Also, I do think that it is just simply important to think before you emoji and, understand two questions. What is the power level? Do you have more power? Actually, using emojis will help you bond with people younger. Or do you have less power? And you may want to err on the side of formality first if you don't know this person as well. And then what's the trust level? Is there high trust already? Or if there's low trust, maybe being careful.
I love the fact that you've created a playbook, because when people do work with you of all different, ages, ethnic background, to sit there and say, hey, we have a playbook now.
Yeah.
And I think that's so brilliant. It's so brilliant because it does take so much anxiety.
So much wasted time. I wrote this book not only for everyone, but for me. Like, I had so much anxiety and paranoia. I would get a message from a client saying, thanks for your patience. And I was like, is that passive aggressive because I followed up? Is that actually, I'm grateful for your patience? Or was it implying, we're probably not going to work with you again and don't bother me again? I would ruminate about it. And I think that we've all been there. And I through my journey of writing this book, I realized so much that this is an opportunity to not get emotionally hijacked, to bring sanity and clarity back, to reject video call fatigue and email overload and rewrite the rules.
Right. So how did you, I'd love, I wanted you to talk a little bit about digital body language relating to diversity and inclusion issues. I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think that's got to be a huge part of it, how different cultures communicate.
Yeah, I'll never forget pre-pandemic, I was on a conference call. 3 of us were remote, 3 people were in the office. And it wasn't until the 26th minute of a 30-minute meeting that someone in the office said, does anyone on the phone have something to share? We have been excluded the entire time. This was actually like an inclusion issue back then, but we didn't think about it that way. We didn't think about how exclusive we were to headquarters versus those not in the room. I think that when it comes to the last year, it's taught us that using these digital tools, we can be more geographically inclusive, less visually biased just to who's in front of us and more creative about how to include others. Introverts kind of almost feel heard through the chat tools because they're not turn taking. They were already struggling with airtime. Those with deep accents are loving closed captioning because English is not their native language and they have to translate what everyone's saying. And they can use these chat tools. They can speak up with chat if they have a deep accent and everyone gets on the same page. I think that at the end of the day, this is our opportunity to actually be more inclusive, not less inclusive, and to realize some of the biases we had. The other thing that I think is so exciting is it helps digital ways of working undermine a lot of traditional body language biases. We often judged who was the tallest in the room. We listened to them more, who had a deep voice pitch. But in virtual mediums, when people are chatting in the chat or engaging in emails or communicating, we're seeing and focus more on their substance, on the thought, on the ideas versus just who people look like or how tall or gregarious their body language is. And I think that is actually an opportunity to create more inclusion instead of erode it. And it's threatening for those that thrived in that environment, but I think we can get there.
Well, there's different options now. So so you say that it's proven, science has proven that we're ruder online. Why?
A study called the online disinhibition effect showed that when we are working behind a screen with the same person, even on a video call or by email versus face-to-face, we feel less empathy for them neurologically because of the loss of body cues. So we are more likely to be blunt and to the point, get me this now. We may not say, get me this now, in a face-to-face meeting, but we might write, I need this now, period. And it can feel much ruder. It can feel more terse. On some ends, it's actually a good thing. It's forcing people to get to the point quickly, but on other ends, it can, feel very alarming, passive aggressive and rude. And I think it goes back to power and trust dynamics. If you have higher power, understand to maybe be careful in your words. It can be very anxiety producing. If you have low power, don't read into things too much. If there's low trust, try not to get emotionally hijacked. If someone sends a, we should talk, ... you're not going to get fired. Likely it's just a meeting request. And if there's high trust, still remember to be explicit and clear.
I really love now with text messages, or that you can leave a voice message on the text message. I really love that because it is really, you're just saying it instead of, that's why I like to talk.
Karen, you are what I call a digital extrovert. Maybe you were an extrovert in person, but I actually talk about digital introverts and digital extroverts in my book. And you can actually understand each other differently in these tools.
Yeah.
And so you are someone who, may love a voice note, but maybe, am I guessing you're not as big with voicemail?
Oh, no, I'm terrible.
Yeah, there you go. I'm diagnosing her on the spot. There are other people that are like, why didn't you listen to my voicemail? I find that.
I forget that we have voicemails. We have voicemails, but we're looking at our chats and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, some people are still calling you and leaving voicemails. Don't forget about them. In my book, I break it down. We have different digital body language styles, like love languages. We have different styles. And it's important to understand the styles of your team. And there's an assessment in the book, so you can actually use it around this. I do a lot of workshops where we help really set some norms despite differences on a team. And it's so powerful because I think a lot of things we assume in others, they didn't respond to me in that email, is just because they have a different style. And again, you don't want to just adopt what everyone's style is because it can get confusing. You want to set channels around specific tasks. What is the importance of that task and which channel should I use? But actually understanding each other in this way can go a long way in creating engagement.
Well, it's just like teaching a child when we all learn differently in a school. We all learn differently in school settings. And so you're trying to teach to different people that learn different ways. And so that's what I think so much of this is. It really is exciting that I've loved the book so much. You just keep going back. You just keep learning and learning. It takes a while and then when you're working with new people, kind of setting that standard, or just be out and out, say, like I say, look, I like to talk. I like to talk. Don't send me those bazillion emails that are a mile long. Just like talk, let's pick up the phone and let's spend 2 seconds instead of all those emails. So it's just saying outright, this is like how I operate. and people can be more forthcoming with what works best, what environments work best for them. And because I think it could probably get pretty confusing if there's so many different types of things, but how does that work when there are so many, and be trying to be as accommodating when you have a big team of people?
Yeah. Don't fret. I have collaboration tool norms in the book as well. And I'll share some of the insights from that as well, that there are different ways that we have to think about these tools. We can't keep adding Slack and email and text.
Right.
I think that each tool has to have a purpose and a response time expectation. Maybe emails are 24 to 48 hours. Maybe IMing is within the business day, but if you send it after business day, or like at 4:45, you'll get a response the next day. Knowing when to call people versus when to continue the reply all chain, and having rules like 4 reply alls, it's time to pick up the phone.
I love your little attachment, what your little follow-up kind of digital body language going.
Yes.
I love that, the little short term, but all in the back of the book, which is so brilliant, is it lays out all of those different scenarios on me that, again, you can really share so much of that with your team to help to alleviate a lot of this.
Yeah, it goes back to 3 things: the complexity, the urgency, and the familiarity with the person. High complex, video calls, emails. Low complex, send an IM, right? Don't waste my time otherwise. Urgency, if it's needed in 5 minutes, it's a different channel than 5 days. And then third, familiarity with the person. Are we colleagues that text all the time, or is this a new prospect?
Right. Okay. Nicole, I want you to tell your story today, that when you were in the showroom, and then having to learn how, when there's people in the showroom and there's people calling in globally, how I know you experienced a bit of that today. Oh, Nicole, I can't hear you.
She's still on mute. I think she's getting on mute, off mute. You're on mute is the quote of the year.
Yes.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Here I am.
Oh,
I was muted. Thank you, Neil. Yes. So I work for a manufacturer that sells office furniture. And the office has been closed. There's no doubt about that. So really in our industry, all of the conversation is around returning to work. And we know we're going to have this hybrid environment. And this, everything that you're talking about, it just fits so perfectly into that conversation as we go back to work. What Karen was referring to is that I have been going back, and I needed to be coaxed back at first. I was a little nervous, and as soon as I got back and I saw my colleagues in person, even though we were masked, there was just such a warmth and a gratitude, and I loved it. But we still will always need to be able to connect to our other colleagues remotely. So I'm sure I'm sure there's going to be a playbook for that as well. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, we have to think about how to be inclusive. We were not inclusive to those on conference calls when we were in the office. So a couple of tips. If you're running a hybrid meeting, have remote attendees lead parts of the meeting. Remove that visual bias. Even have a remote host and a live office host, and make sure that there's equal play in the agenda. Another thing is keep the chat tool going. Have a screen share in the office of the chat, so remote attendees are sort of sharing their ideas as you're discussing, or have specific times where the chat tool is on fire and everyone can engage, and those in the office can sort of respond to it. Or use virtual whiteboards and a live whiteboard. A virtual whiteboard can be used for remote attendees to share their ideas, and then another whiteboard, for those that, want to share face-to-face. And I think even just those short examples are effective as ways to sort of change the equal and build a more equal culture. But again, it is hard. We're going to have to really fight the bias of just having the chit chat, making decisions with those just in the room. And even simple things like the note taker maybe of action items is remote. And if the note taker is remote, we will make sure that everyone knows what's going on. That is remote. Like, that's an example of where we want to make sure everything is captured and it won't be captured otherwise.
Right. I want everybody to put your questions in the chat, and then we will call on you and you can ask Erica your questions on your own, because I know all of you were amazing when you signed up. You had a lot of great questions. So make sure you put those in there, and then we'll go ahead and call on you. Is that, am I seeing that? Okay, hold on a second.
And in the spirit of this, I'll say hi to some folks as they're joining. Hi, Nicole. We're excited for your question. Mark and Harriet. Looks like you have some music notes in front of you. That looks cool. Nick, I'm so grateful to have you all here. John, David, Kit, and even simple things like calling out people. I'm a big fan of cold calling and in meetings, like just getting the party started to really hear from folks around what they're thinking about.
Okay. So, hey, how about Mark Polson? You want to ask a question, Mark?
And we have some questions coming in now, Karen.
Okay, great. Okay, good.
Yeah. So, okay, hi, Erica. Great talk. My question is, do you think that digital language has moved more towards flattening out the organization so that people are maybe less deferential to those with more senior titles in the organization? So it is, for lack of a better word, more egalitarian. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, great question. So, there isn't one digital language to start. There are different digital body languages, and they're often based by the collaboration channels we use. So I would actually argue that email, the way that it's set up is actually, I think across the board, digital tools allow us to break silos more, to email the CEO directly, to, connect with those and break silos in ways that don't allow us to just be limited to who we're networked to and can flatten hierarchies. But I think that they are a bit different depending on the channel. And there are hierarchy signals even within different digital channels. So think of the fact that there's different languages, digital body languages by channel. So let's start with email. I know people that even look at the hierarchy based on who's on the to line, who's on the CC line. I actually knew a colleague that I interviewed that said, we judge whether our boss, who's on the good side of our boss based on his order of our email addresses and email. And it's kind of like a bit of the hierarchy and versus who's BCC'd and maybe, especially with that, are they spying on us? Is something going on? Are people observing us, especially if we CC a boss in a message? So there are some cues around hierarchy in email, but when we go to tools like Slack or other flattening tools where hierarchy is really not there in the channel, it very much opens a playing field where there is much more equality and less more of that hierarchical nature in flattening curves. And I think for some leaders, this is very empowering. For others, it's very scary. And, I'm a big fan of just setting a norms around it, in terms of how we use these channels. Maybe the instant messaging channels are places to share information, but in meetings, we make decisions. Or emails are where work requests actually happen, and some of these other formats are places where, we can have dialogue or brainstorming, but the email is where work is requested oftentimes by a manager to an employee. So those are just some dynamics that I think might be helpful to think about in our modern construct.
Thank you.
Patty, you have a question about exclamation points?
Yeah, that's such a tough one. I love to use exclamation points in my emails. I put 5 in an email to a friend. But I know in business it's not appropriate. And after I write the email the way I like it, I go back and delete them. Are they appropriate for work emails? And can I get away with more than one?
Patty, I am here for you. I got you. So I'm going to share a quick visual from my book. Look, I just did that in 1 minute. I just asked the question. I like to say that, first of all, exclamation points can mean different things. To some, it can feel like excitement. For others, it can feel like shouting. To others, it can feel like urgency. This is urgent! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. So it's also about knowing the cues around it. Women feel pressure to use more exclamation points than men. That's what the research shows. And there can be different meanings as you use multiple of them. And this is just a fun, pithy little example from my book. Don't worry, I have a lot of other examples like this where you can see what they mean, baby boomer versus millennial and beyond. But 1 is maybe basic enthusiasm. 2 or 3 is, I'm excited or I'm angry. 3 is, you could be sarcastic or it's not really appropriate. 3 or to 7, 10 is maybe I've never been this excited. And then, you hit 1 and you go from there. But I think that one of the things that the research did show was that certain individuals in the workplace can get judged by this as well. So it's also about knowing your audience. In fact, one study related to emojis showed that when a younger female used multiple emojis in the workplace compared to a man at any rank level in that same workplace, the woman would be seen as more incompetent. The man would be seen as more casual and friendly. So I'm a big fan of breaking these biases, and I talk about them in the book, but I also talk about how to fight them, just like up talking or voice pitch. There are digital body language biases, just like traditional. So my general rule of thumb for you for exclamations is to use them cautiously and carefully. Know when to use them to actually deepen connections. Guys, you throw in a emoji or exclamation. It might connect with some of your junior employees or some female members. And, I'm not everyone. I am also a big fan of women who hate exclamations and hate emojis. You don't have to use them as well. But also don't judge people based on some of these simple punctuation cues as well. Assume good intent.
Thank you.
How about you, Joshua? You have a great question.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether this falls into the category of digital body language or not, so correct me on that. But regarding our use of virtual backgrounds, like in video meetings like this, I think that we tend to overthink or sometimes underthink, basically what the background is and what we show and what we want to project. So in the context of business meetings, how can we strike the right balance? How can we avoid pretension while maintaining professionality?
Great question, and absolutely excited to talk about this one. So I get a lot of questions on virtual backgrounds. A year ago, digital body language meant emails, texts, and IMs and conference calls. It didn't mean video calls. Now people instantly think, oh, are you going to teach me about video calls? And it's really, if you think about digital body language, video presence and virtual backgrounds are one signal, a multitude of many. But I want you to think about digital body language when it comes to, communicating, as it's about how we make others feel in a modern marketplace. So let's talk about virtual backgrounds. I mean, I think there's a lot of like buzz out there about Room Rater and on Twitter and judging people for their virtual backgrounds. And there's so much privilege to this, and also a lot of like obnoxiousness. I've seen stories of CEOs like last April, who run organizations of thousands of employees, walk out of their Hamptons pool and sit with their Palm Beach behind them, and not really engage their employees that are living in a shoebox in New York City and struggling and home alone. And then I've also seen, an employee who maybe had an unmade bed behind them, and their boss had to say, this is a client meeting, like shape up, dress up a little bit. So it's on both sides that we have to be thoughtful and empathetic around this. And there's a privilege dynamic here too. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm a mom of 2 kids under 3 years old. I live in a small apartment in New York City. I am an expert on digital body language. This is one virtual background. I also have my normal background, but it's not this beautiful bookshelf, in a huge house. It is. And what I realized is that it's not about having a beautiful virtual background. It's about having a clean and clear background, so that there's a few things. One, people are focused on you. They're not distracted by other things. 2, if you are presenting, I recommend looking into the camera. I've tried to do that today as much as possible, even though I can't see you. I try to look down here and there to read your body language, but it does help others build a connection. 3, if you haven't yet, spend $50 on a good webcam and a ring light. Like, they're not hard, and it does make a big difference in building virtual presence. And last but not least, I do think that at the end of the day, you can ask others, just like, how does this background look? Get some feedback. Don't be shy of asking for feedback, but also know what is enough as well. Like, you don't have to buy these. I mean, let's be honest, Karen's orchids are beautiful, and I wish I had orchids behind me, but I don't even have a desk. I'm in a 5x7 room right now, so I don't even have space for it. And I think that we have to be, authentic and vulnerable, but also professional. And it's just carrying that line.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Hey, John Mary. How are you, John? You have a question.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Hi, Erica. Very nice meeting you. Thank you very much for your conversation. And I have your book in my Amazon cart right now. So I have to hit the button.
Hit the button first. Hit the button before you ask the question. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to hit the button. But my question, so we have weekly team meetings, right? And so my question around, we have a lot of communication, and we're scattered throughout the country. So do you think it's good to set rules of engagement for Zoom calls in advance, best practices around doing that? Who gets the talking stick?
Thank you, John. This is a lot about why I wrote this book, and it's all about setting explicit norms and expectations. I have a few ideas and best practices for you. The first is, as you're running and you're really trying to drive engaged digital meetings or hybrid meetings, as we move back to hybrid work, remember that you have to think of yourself, if you're the meeting host, not as just an office meeting host, but almost like a TV show host. They were always having to connect from a screen from afar. They have clear agendas. They're prepared for the segment. They call on people and bring them into different segments. They don't just assume people are going to speak up. They use different cues, whether visual or written cues. And so, I often recommend before the meeting, always have a clear agenda. Set expectations. Do you want people on video or off video? Maybe there's video call fatigue, but you want to see people for the first 5 minutes. Just say, please join on video for the first 5 minutes. Then you can do what you prefer. Like, people actually feel valued when they know these things. And also, if you want people on video, you don't want to create an opt-in. You want to create an opt-out. Like, let me know beforehand if you can't join. but the expectation is you do, and that's important. Then during the meeting, you want to design for inclusivity. Don't expect it's going to happen. If you say, who wants to share, they'll usually only hear from the extroverts first, or those most senior in a company. So, I have a client who does something where she says, I want everyone to answer these 2 questions. And everyone goes into the chat, they share their answers. There's like awkward silence. It's okay. It gives time for people to think. And she sends these questions in the agenda in advance, so her introverts had time to process ideas. Then she calls on people with the most diverse or different perspectives from the chat, from their discussions. And research shows we're more likely to speak more clearly once we've written our ideas first. We also avoid the bias of who's usually speaking and taking all the airtime. And it creates different cues, especially for hosts, to bring in and call in those voices that usually aren't shared. You could use a virtual whiteboard for this too, or breakout rooms as well. And last but not least, one thing that I often find is incredibly important is having a meeting note taker during that meeting who is summarizing action steps, and outcomes, and sending that within 30 minutes of the meeting. This isn't like a 3-day later thing. 30 minutes later, it's sent out. It's like the new virtual handshake. Everyone's aligned. What happened? What happens next? We've been in too many meetings where we say something and then it doesn't happen. And again, we need to make it more explicit, and it creates alignment and people feel appreciated. But if you're running this meeting, John, just simply starting the meeting with, here's what the agenda is. Here's how I want to engage all of you to participate today. And if we all stay present for the next 25 minutes, I'll end the meeting 10 minutes early. Like simple things like that, avoid multitasking and get everyone on the same page. So those are just some ideas for you, but encourage anyone in the chat as well to share any others that they're practicing.
Great answer. Hey, John Martin, you have a question? How you doing, John?
Hey, good to see you, Karen. This has been great. Erica, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I guess, yeah, one thing that was really interesting to me was when you were talking about the trust and power matrix for gauging like how you engage or the foot that you put forward, right? And I can understand that can be internally facing with, say, a boss, or externally facing with like a new client. But from my perspective as a 20-something, as someone who's pretty digitally literate, I think it's pretty easy for people of my generation to write off or compare out people of other generations who are not as tech literate. And so, like, I mean, that was 2019 and before, and now it's like, it seems like this has been an equalizer across the board. But I mean, what is your take on that? Do you think that this is helping like bring generations closer? Is it furthering that divide? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, my take is kind of like a paradox because it's been better and worse in different ways. Let's talk about what's been challenging to start. So certain challenges from the past pre-pandemic have only gotten amplified. And I actually have a whole chapter on generations. And what I found is we all know that baby boomers are not all the same. Millennials are not all the same. But what I did find is that there are different digital body language styles that are often age-based, but not always. So there are digital body language natives, which may be you, John. I'm one of them too. We love text IM, chat tools. We're very apt with this. Maybe, we may have used AOL Instant Messenger since the time we were in high school. So savvy in these tools. And then the other end of the spectrum are who I call digital body language adapters. These are individuals who feel like immigrants to this country of virtual work. They grew up with landline cultures. They have reluctance to new technology. They freak out, when planning for a Zoom call. They often have longer messages. I'll give you an example where, sometimes they don't always know the cues. So my father, when he sends me a text message, it starts with "Dear Erica" and ends with "Love, Dad," and I have to scroll through it because it's as long as a letter. And he doesn't quite know that a text is not the same as a letter, but it just goes to show that we are not all the same, and we can't assume we are all the same. So I do believe that digital natives need to have patience. Don't assume that everyone is like you. Digital adapters should ask for help, but also remind natives of some things that are better, when to pick up the phone. I'll see digital natives send an email with all their questions, and then the adapter will say, let's get on the phone to discuss. And the native will be like, why don't you just answer my email? I don't want to talk on the phone. And the adapter will be like, why don't you just pick up the phone? It's so much easier. And so I think that this is a moment to understand that we are different and that there are benefits of both and that we can learn from each other. as a result. And that's my hope, that we can, use this moment to bridge connection, not erode it. I am, optimistic and pessimistic about hybrid work when it comes to that. There will be a reaction, but the other thing that I will share is in a study I ran, and I'll share the link to the HBR article where the study is, if you want to read it. One of the things we found among office workers is that the highest level of digital anxiety was not coming from baby boomers or Gen Xers. It was actually coming from Gen Zs, those newest to the workplace. And I think that they may be tech savvy, but when they're emailing their bosses digitally, there is a lot of anxiety. And I think that is something a bit counterintuitive around this, that they're struggling in a different way in this culture.
I don't see another question in there, so I'm going to ask one. So I want to know what your predictions for what's going to happen now, like in the new workplace, masks. We don't have, I just saw something that just came out. It's like, no more masks, maybe, with a lot of places. It was happening quicker maybe than maybe we all thought, but I'd love to know your forecast. What do you think?
Great question, Karen. And I'll welcome others to share in the chat what are their forecasts as well. So I will share, I think some of these forecasts may be positive, some of them may be a little pessimistic, but I want to be fully honest here. I think one of the things that I am seeing is that, traditional body language has always mattered, but our digital body language, after spending a year on screens, is going to shape how we meet face-to-face moving forward. We have been looking at our phones for an entire year nonstop in our screens. This is going to cause us to, I project, have less direct eye contact when we're in face-to-face meetings, to feel like it's appropriate to look down at our screens, kind of like I am right now while we're talking to people, to look at our phone much more, to be distracted by notifications. We are also going to be more impatient. Meeting time, starting on time. Everything used to start 7 minutes late in person. And I think there's going to be a bit of a promptness or impatience, get to the point quickly. We've spent a year reading bullet pointed emails. And I think we're going to expect people to think and speak in bullet points as well. And so understanding that our digital body language is inseparable to our traditional body language. We're going to be looking at screens in the side of a room while we're in a hybrid meeting with people face to face. And understanding that this could cause us to miss the eye contact, to miss the lean in a sales conversation, to oftentimes actually reduce some of the ways we relied on body language before, I think is interesting and important to understand. And the fact that we have to become fluent in both now. The other thing that I think we're in a big grand experiment around is some companies are really promoting work from anywhere, like the CEO of Salesforce. We're a work from anywhere culture now. The other end of the spectrum, the CEO of Chubb said, we're a work from office culture. You're going to be back in the office. And not everyone is as progressive as they're saying they will be. And a company can say they're progressive, but if a manager is visually biased and has a preference to be in the office and rewards his team for those that are showing up in the office, even if they act like they have a flexible culture, this is really going to cause poor results in employee engagement and satisfaction. Employees that want to stay remote will be biased for it. And I think that it's easy to have a, hybrid work conversation, but one of my forecasts is we're going to see some performance review impacts of this that we aren't really talking about, but we have to actually build into performance review design now. So those are two things that I think are really important to think about, and at risk if we don't engage and learn how to use digital and physical, and learn how to ensure that we don't become so biased or affect the career progression of those that are not in the office.
Right, exactly. Hey, Jim, I know you have a question. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. This has been great, Erica, really illuminating. So I have a question about politics, organizational politics, right? I've heard stories.
Okay, not real politics, organizational. Okay, I'm with you.
Universities to corporate, when the people, leaders are leveraging this virtual environment to make changes, reorganizations, and people are sort of, blinded, right? And so there's so much anxiety out there for a lot of people. So I guess my question is, number one, how can people sort of respond to that or try to sort of make their way and, have an impact virtually, but also as things open up, will it be a race to meet as many people in person as possible, or those right persons in person to sort of engage one-on-one? What are you thinking about from that perspective?
Yeah. One of the things that happened in during the COVID-19 pandemic is strong ties got stronger and weak ties got weaker. And, when we were at a happy hour that we didn't know well, maybe we could bond with a senior manager because, we were having drinks and built, had the body cues and could build that connection, but we can't even get a meeting with them, in a virtual setting. And so I do think that there's going to be a bit of a race of how can I get in front of my boss? How can I get in front of decision makers? And I think that it's the job of leaders to not be so biased around this, to really say, I'm going to be inclusive and fair around this. I'm going to host hybrid lunch and learns. If you're in the office, you can join live, but we're going to include anyone not in the office, and they're going to be on screens. And we're going to start all the questions from remote attendees. And we're going to make sure that half of them are coming from remote, half of them are coming from in the office, and I think that it's up to us as leaders to actually understand that we have to navigate those politics, or else it's going to get really bad.
Yeah.
There will be conversations in the office that, we all know tend to cause people to promote others that they see more. That's what the data shows. If we see someone more, even if their output is not good, we tend to promote them versus someone that we don't have that face time with. So we have to fight that really hard. And it's going to be all about figuring out how to be more inclusive about it.
And having better skills, digital communication skills.
Yeah. Exactly. And a lot of leaders prefer face-to-face. They want to read the cues of others. So, even there will be people that will interview virtually and people that will interview in person. And that's itself a bias. So, learning how to address that, whether it's multiple, maybe those virtually get to meet more people, in a virtual setting or whatever it may be. There's got to be some creative ways to tackle it.
Okay, Arun, I see you there. Hi, great to see you. Unmute. Oh, I'm trying to get him to unmute it.
I'm right there.
Okay.
So hi, great to see you, Karen, and I've been enjoying this very much. I'm a student of this kind of thinking, and one of the things is in the organization I work at, which our logo is right behind me, is we've been going through what we're calling a cultural transformation, and that we're finding that that making meaning is really important in every part of the day, and we're changing our meeting styles, we're changing everything. And one of the things I'm most concerned about is this video conference of the group in the room versus the individuals in afar. And I at my last job, we had a lot of meetings with people who were Silicon Valley folks, and they would sit around a conference room and everybody would be like. So how do you navigate that? Do you have to get different equipment? Do you have to have, because even the face on the screen is much more engaging than a room full of people sitting around and staring at a TV?
Yeah. Great question. I think that it really involves us to rewrite the rules of, as you said, of how we make meaning, how we invite people to a meeting, how we engage them in the meeting. And I think it goes back to, some of the best books I've read about community and belonging are all about rituals. And thinking about, as we move back to hybrid work, what are the rituals that we loved previous to the pandemic? What are the rituals that have actually been working in a virtual setting, and how will we evolve them in a hybrid context? So, there are teams that have rituals of people going around and sharing a win or a challenge, or using the chat tool to get connected like we did here during this discussion. And how can we bring some of that alignment back, but physically in the room? So maybe we have an office room where people are sitting around a table. Maybe we have a screen where everyone virtually is in gallery view mode and on video. And maybe we make sure that everyone that is in, I have a story about this, someone who was presenting to people in the office, but the person remote that was presenting could only see his own face on the screen instead of like everyone else. And it was so difficult for him to read others. So making sure that those that are remote can see the full office view of attendees, or it can move around. There's got to be some Silicon Valley tech people that are innovating around this right now, but can rotate it, so that you can see different faces, or you can cue in when people speak different faces. Or if it's sort of a whiteboarding session, there actually may be moments where you will want to cue into digital first and then physical. So like a virtual whiteboard, maybe your mural or other tools, actually having everyone based in the room, have their computers up, contributing to the whiteboard, everyone virtually contributing to the whiteboard. And then the whiteboard is actually the screen share and in the room on a screen share as a way so that people can innovate together. And I know that's not great for people in the room. They're looking down at their computers, but it's actually powerful for group brainstorming.
We've been trying that with Miro, which has been really great. It's a little tricky because like the previous question around the speakers having, or the digital natives for digital adapters, not like just getting the Post-it on the right place was a challenge for some folks. Other folks were like, blasting away, like they had everything on this. Then some people were still at the starting line, Thank you.
Thanks.
So I can't believe it's 4 o'clock already. Joe, can you save your question for VIP?
Okay, sure. It's quick and it's interesting. We haven't covered it yet.
Okay, quick, make it quick.
So Erica, thanks for taking my question. My question is, we're talking a lot about the internal side of this, but those that are external facing, market facing, what are the implications of digital body language for, say, people in sales?
You're speaking my language. I work with a ton of sales teams, and many of them were just like, how do I do this last year when they call me? How do we use digital body language in sales? So a couple of ideas for you, because I want to be quick. Right. First is I've innovated with a lot of sales teams I work with around how we design virtual sales meetings. For example, one of the things that one of my clients is doing now is in a prospect call for business development, they are zooming in an existing client to talk to that prospect for 5 minutes about how much they love that service provider. And then that client is zooming out, and then they're continuing the sales meeting. Wow. If we had a face-to-face sales chat, we never had an existing client there with us selling us for us. But it's so easy for people to hop in and hop out, and it's actually speeding up trust building. Another thing is redesigning. So you're sending all the presentations in advance, a quick video, the presentation where everyone can watch, and then using the time in the sales meeting to actually discuss and engage. I think here, video body language does matter a lot. It's very effective and important. And then also knowing how to follow up in the right ways in virtual settings. But actually, I would say for many sales teams I work with, they're doing quite well, because what would have taken 3 weeks to schedule on someone's calendar is now a video meeting. In other cases, it's also about knowing what is that prospect's digital body language style? Is this a phone person, where I should just call them out of the blue and probably get to them quicker? Or do I need to send, thoughtful materials? They're an introvert, they want to read everything, and then we'll have a formal discussion. And even understanding digital body language cues and styles can be effective in sales. Those are just some examples for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. There's so much information. We're going to follow up with a lot of the great things that Erica has put together. Also, for the people that were able to purchase books, we'll be following up with those for you as well. So I would love for Mina, can you hop on a sec to close the program? And then again, people with the VIP sign in front of their name, please just stay on. You will be moved in, and we'll have some additional time with Erica.
And those that can't, thank you for joining. I hope you'll tell everyone about the book and enjoy it yourself, so that we can all navigate and bring clarity and sanity back to work.
Yeah, exactly. Where's Mina? Mina,
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Mina.
Hi, thank you for giving me a minute. I'll be really quick, but we are partners with Create Exchange. We're so lucky to have Karen as a member of our in our space. We are Cambridge Innovation Center, a co-working and private office space in West Philadelphia, and we're here to offer all of the attendees today a special offering if you choose to join this year. $100 off your first 3 months if you join by the end of the year. So feel free to reach out to me with questions. I drop my email in there. Check out our website. And yeah, reach out even if you're not sure, come in for a tour.
Come visit me. Come visit me.
Yeah, come see Karen.
We have a lot of free books. We have a lot of free signed books, don't we, Mina? We're working on.
We do, yeah, among other great amenities. So yeah, come check us out.
Thanks so much, Mina, and thank you. It was
Thank
great
you.
to see everybody. Hope to see you all soon. All right, bye. Bye-bye.